Welcome! This video will show you how to install an extreme switching or summit switch. In this video, the switch is front mounted in the rack. Some switches can also be mid mounted or rear mounted, using a procedure similar to the one shown here, except that the mounting brackets will look different and will be positioned differently on the switch. To install your switch in a rack, you'll need the following tools: a number 1 Phillips screwdriver for attaching mounting brackets to the switch. The brackets and their screws are included in the switch packaging. A screwdriver for attaching the switch to the rack. The size and type of the screwdriver will depend on the type of rack mounting screws you're using. 4 screws for attaching the switch to the rack. An electrostatic discharge ESD wrist strap for attaching optional components like transceivers. Before opening the box, find a level surface with enough space to set the switch and the other contents of the box. When you open the box, you'll find the following items: the switch, which is inside a protective bag, a quick reference guide that describes how to install the switch and make it ready to use, an RJ45 management cable, 2 mounting brackets. These will attach the switch to the rack. Note that the brackets included with your switch might look different from the ones shown here. Screws for attaching the mounting brackets to the switch. An adapter for connecting an RJ45 cable to pin slots in another device, for example, a remote power supply. 4 rubber feet for placing the switch on a desktop or shelf. You will not need these if you plan to install the switch in a rack. Remove the brackets and screws from their protective wrapping. To begin the installation, lay the switch on one side with the front of the switch toward you. Lay a mounting bracket on the top side of the switch and align it with the holes in the switch. Align the bent part of the bracket or the flange flush with the front of the switch. Insert a mounting screw into each hole and tighten it with the number 1 screwdriver. When the first bracket has been attached, flip the switch over and attach the other bracket to the other side in the same way. After the brackets are attached, the switch is ready to mount into the rack. Slide the switch into the rack so that the holes in the bracket flanges align with the holes in the rack. Be sure that the switch is level in the rack. It's a good idea to have another person to support the weight of the switch as it's being attached to the rack. Insert a rack mounting screw through the hole in one of the flanges and into the rack hole. Use your larger screwdriver to fasten it to the rack. Insert a rack mounting screw through the bracket on the other side and fasten it to the rack in the same way. Repeat until both sides of the switch are secured to the rack with 2 screws, 4 screws in all. Now that the switch is firmly mounted in the rack, you can attach network interface cables to the switch ports. To attach a cable, make sure the connector is free of dust, oil, and other contaminants. Remove any rubber dust cover from the port. Then press the connector into the port until the connector is firmly seated. Repeat as needed for other ports. Next, connect the RJ45 management cable to the Ethernet management port located on the front of the switch. Connect the other end of the cable to a management console, a terminal or PC with terminal emulation software. Wear the ESD wrist strap for this step. You can attach optional components such as optical transceivers to the switch ports. Begin by removing any rubber dust covers from the port where you'll install the transceiver. Then hold the transceiver by its sides and slide it into the port until you hear it click. If your switch doesn't have an internal power supply built in, you'll need to provide a power supply unit. For information about which power supply units are compatible with your switch, refer to the hardware installation guide. To install a power supply, start by making sure it's right side up. Then slide it into the designated slot until you feel the power supply click into place. Don't slam the power supply into the switch. If your switch doesn't have fan units built in, you'll need to supply those as well. For information about which fan units are compatible with your switch, refer to the hardware installation guide. To install a fan unit, slide it into the fan slot until it is all the way in. Use the 2 thumb screws to attach the fan unit firmly to the switch. Finally, plug the AC power cord into the receptacle on the back of the switch. DC power options are also available for some switches. Refer to the hardware installation guide for details. Your completed installation will look something like this. If you plan to connect your switches in stacks, we recommend locating them close to each other in the rack, as seen here. Now that you've installed the switch and connected it to the network, download and configure the operating system using the instructions on the Extreme website. Your quick reference guide has the address for the web page.